I'm Shin-Horng Chen, the moderators of these sections. Being a moderator, I enjoy some advantage because I can read some materials beforehand. So I was a little bit excited because we have 3 speakers, 2 from Germany, 1 from Japan. I was in kind of a situation to create some kinds of international tension between Japan and Germany. Of course, we still respect. And so you just heard that all the discussions central on the so-called Society 5.0, Industrial 4.0, also aging society. Probably the 2 countries don't need to worry about Taiwan for this moment because we are still distant from Germany and Japan, because according to a latest survey, we are about to approach Industry 3.5. Yeah, okay. So I would like to start from Franz. Just now, because you mentioned because of the Japanese context, their answers to Industry 4.0 actually focus on the social aspect. So they come up with the idea of Society 5.0. So I would like you to look back to the German case. When you propose the Industry 4.0, do you neglect these aspects of the social aspects of the digital economy? That's the one key question for you. The other thing is that you mentioned that the so-called silo thinking is one obstacle you observe in Japan. Actually, in Taiwan, we also make these kinds of complaints. So it seems to me that the silo effect is quite common in many countries. Perhaps when it comes to the so-called digital economy, you will bring the so-called silo effect to another level, because we need to come up with some solution of innovation based on the so-called issue or issue-driven. So if there is a digital minister here, or if you address to the digital minister in G20, what would be your advice to them? Okay, Franz.
Thank you very much. So, of course, as I mentioned, Society 5.0 is more comprehensive than Industry 4.0 in that it explicitly targets or includes social issues as part of the framework. Well, of course, since Society 5.0 was after Industry 4.0, you can always improve. I don't think that the Germany is neglecting that, but the people involved in developing the concept is driven by industry as well, and industry platforms, and there is a tradition in German industry for research consortia or for having these round tables or platforms to discuss common issues among industry. And so the focus, of course, was on industry, but I think the understanding in Germany is as well that this has social ramifications and social implications. However, I like the Japanese concept, and I think Germany can learn something from Japan by including explicitly looking also how digital transformation contributes to social issues at large, not only to productivity in industry and competitiveness. While the silo thinking, it's all relative. Of course, we are as human beings, our brain is limited, and we only see, the way we cope with the complexity is that we ignore it. we move within small areas, and of course organizations are the boundaries within which we move and function, and without these boundaries we could not work and function. So the boundaries are important to be there, no? But at the same time, because we are part of a complex systems, we need to integrate across boundaries. Now, we've established, I think, in established technologies and so on, we developed a lot of interfaces that help us to work swiftly across boundaries. But when you have a new challenge, a new technology coming up, where you don't have these interfaces that help you sort of cross boundaries or communicate across boundaries, you become aware of the boundaries, and you become aware of the complexity that you normally can avoid when you move within your boundaries. So I think that's the big challenge, and you're right that everybody is facing that. I think in Germany, because we have a tradition of industry collaborations, for example, if you take the automotive industry in Germany, you have a lot of platforms where new technologies are being discussed, where you have different actors within the industry, you have research institutions. Also, the collaboration between universities and industry is working relatively smoothly in Germany if compared, for example, to Japan. So we established these kind of infrastructures to overcome or to help talk across boundaries when there are new things coming up where we don't have these established interfaces.
Yeah. Thank you. Atsushi has been a friend to me, so I would like to give him a chance to speak for Japan. Because Franz, as an outsider, points out there are 3 obstacles for Japan to march towards the Society 5.0. Also, we have a local audience that echoes the 3 obstacles. So my first issue to Atsushi actually is how will you deal with all these obstacles if they are relevant? And the second issue actually is you don't have much time to elaborate on your concept of inclusive innovation. Actually, we discussed these issues in Japan before, so I would like to give you more times to talk about this issue. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I think the 3 challenges laid out, it was very important challenges, and I think it's also put in the more relative context that we are seeing some sort of efforts or some things that are happening in terms of it's not, you don't see it happen overnight, but you see some of the examples of young people getting more entrepreneurial and reaching out to the different sectors, different kind of outside of the organizations to come together in a place like the cafe. We have startup cafes. You see some of the young people bringing all the elder people as well, sort of becoming a very interesting place, a platform that are emerging in Japan. One example that I can cite you is that recently I visited Okinawa, and there is a new startup cafe in Okinawa that's just started on using the facilities that are the traditional shops street, where it's already shut down because of that. There's lack of. There's nobody living actually. There people are moved, so no business is there. So it's a lot of empty facilities. So he's using these places to create a new kind of cafe where it's like an accelerator program, and also IT training for local high school students, also the elderlies and retired people. And it's a very interesting place, and it became a kind of model in Japan to see this kind of activities, like accelerator programs, can be opened in places where there's nobody, actually all the shut down local business communities and so on and so forth. And it's kind of a new emerging trend. And for the Okinawa part, there are many, half of them that they're accelerating program are foreigners coming to Okinawa, and because it's a very unique environment, right? Because we have a lot of U.S. presence and their military presence and other things. So it's a very nice place to live. You know, it's like Taiwan. It's very warm and so on and so forth. So I guess that's one thing. And so that which relates to this inclusiveness issue. See, one of the example of the Okinawa is because they are bringing in the foreign startups in their programs, working with the local community to solve the local problems that are particular to the Okinawa area. Because it's the island, the business is going down. I mean, you need to have new dynamism in business, so on and so forth. And involving the people from outside of Japan to address or to have the issues that they see in locally. So it's sort of the inclusive innovation. I mean, we have some of the work that are coming out, from India and other scholars are talking about more issues driven that are peculiar to the local, and those, including those factors that are usually we don't think of as innovators, but now you're bringing in the people that are not traditional innovators to be part of this inclusiveness effort. So this new kind of program of bringing in the local high school students that are, for the IoT kind of training, now starting up their companies and so on and so forth, including those people that are not traditionally considered to be the main actors for our Japanese innovation system to come to the part of it, and including the people that are from outside of Japan to come to Japan and then be part of the Japanese ecosystem. I mean, these are the kind of trend, but we wanted to accelerate this trend. So that's why when we talked about inclusive innovation, that's where we are thinking of bringing more different actors and different actors that are traditionally we consider as a part of the Japanese ecosystem.
So not only Japan is back, Japan is different now. Yeah. Okay. Ingrid, your topic is about the race between technology and age. Initially, I thought you wanted to talk about how to deal with the so-called aging society. But actually, you try to dig out all the so-called patenting data and try to figure out how the technologies have been evolving, over time. So but you end up with the conclusion that you don't see any race between age and technology. I kind of, feel a little bit confusing. How will you interpret your conclusion? Why you end up with this conclusion? That's one thing, and the other thing is that you bring up an important issue for the development of the digital economy. Technology has not been technology change has not been neutral. It's also about how you apply the technology, not just how you produce the technology. But from all this patenting data, we simply cannot figure out how the technology have been applied or to address some specific issue in the social context. So how would you, respond to all these issues? Okay.
Thanks for the question. So I see the technological evolution as a key determinant for welfare, and the question is what drives technological evolution. And it's, on the one side, it's very clear, it's the knowledge, it's what people know, what our engineers know, and how they are able to shape a certain technology. So that's from a supply side perspective, what do we provide as a technology? Another driver of technological evolution is also the demand side. And one very clear example that we have heard here before is if we have an aging society, if we run out of workers, a problem that we also have in Germany, especially for certain jobs, then technology will be developed in order to overcome that scarcity. And the mechanism how from an economic perspective that works is very easy. It's just the relative prices. If you don't have anybody who will be working in that field, then technology, then, well, these persons become scarce, their wages will rise, and in that sense it makes technology more competitive, even if it has been expensive at the very beginning, and that is also a driver. And in that sense, we have a demand side argument, which also shapes the technological development, and I think that the aging society and the associated scarcities that we have at the, I would say, the new needs, that will also affect the direction in which technology will be driven. So I think we have to decompose, look from a demand side perspective, that's us, the consumers, with our needs, independent of the age, but on average, if the share of the older becomes larger, then their impact will be larger due to their mere amount. And on the other side, it is also the skills that we have in order to develop certain technologies. So, and these two perspectives, they have to be brought together and seen in an international perspective. And a second point is that if your question with respect to who drives technological development and who applies technological development, so Germany is really, I would say, almost, yeah, it's hard for them to understand that the big leading industries are now not Germany anymore. So all the digital technologies we are not that bad, but we are not at the forefront, and our key competences are still more in the manufacturing sector. And the question is, will we be able to enhance this with technology, yes or no? And I'm sure that it's only the international competition why now our German manufacturing industries collaborate for the first time in their life on platforms, because they know, well, Germany is, we're good, but in this world, and the world is not waiting for us, we have to work together. So this is very important. And maybe a last thought, which I think is also important, that we as Germans increasingly think, as already said before, as Europeans. So just being embedded in an ecosystem which does not stop at the national frontiers.
Okay, yeah. One benefit of this workshop is we can bring a lot of Europeans to Taipei. Especially, I know some of you actually it was for the first time to be in Taipei. So for this moment, I would like to open the floor for Q&A or discussions. Oh, we have one question there. The lady says, yeah.
Hi, I'm Margaret again, and I work for the Institute for Information Industry. We serve as a think tank for the government. I have two questions each for Professor Sunami, and another one is for Professor Ott. So for Professor Sunami, I would like to know that you've mentioned about the target of government and invest R&D at least 1% of the GDP. Could you elaborate more about this, like more practical approaches to achieve this goal? And another question for Professor Ott is that you've mentioned about the interaction between human and machine. So if it's potentially benefit if efficiently reorganized. And you also mentioned about the importance of the classification of robots. So from these 2 points of view, we may conclude that IPR strategy is important. So I would like to know your suggestions about, from these 2 points of view, what's the role of the government to do this regarding to IPR strategy? Thank you.
Could we collect some more questions and then the response later? Any more?
My name is Eva Yue from Digital Transformation Association. According to what I have already heard this morning, that has to do with the Society 5.0 in the digital era. What I'm interested in knowing is that how can a society, from the perspective of a business or government, can transform digitally in order to get the target of Society 5.0? Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe this question is for Dr. Sunami. Thank you.
I'm Chen, retired from government jobs just recently. Two questions for Professor Ott. You, in your earlier part of your speech, you reached a conclusion that R&D is becoming a more important drive for technology advancement. But when you are using those patent number to measure the importance of R&D, seems not so convincing for me, especially, for example, in Taiwan, as far as I know, I believe about 80% of those patents are majorly from very few companies. They are focused on the betterment of some of the manufacturing processes, which are not really applicable for our general living standard or our welfare of our consumers. So I wonder if those patent number can be a good measurement for R&D effort for the society or even for the government. Second question, which is really a side issue, however, but it's just out of curiosity. One of your conclusions mentioned that digital literacy becoming a major argument in German for the education system and the education materials, which is kind of shock for me when we realize the digital era is coming around us, and so important there are so much effort, so much importance proved us that the R&D is becoming more in driving. So how come we still have an argument? Do we need digital literacy? So if that's okay for you, please elaborate more about the argument in Germany. Thank you.
Okay, let's start from Professor Atsushi. Yep. Okay.
Okay. About the investment target. In Japan, actually, if you compare to other OECD countries, most of the what we call the national expenditure of R&D is carried out by the private sector, and most of the large portion so far is really driven by the private sector investment in Japan. After the Lehman shock, we haven't seen much of the improvement in the private sector's investment within Japan. I mean, for the national R&D accounts, and so there naturally the question is, can the government cannot you come in and just take everything else, the rest by the government, but because of the limited resources and we have a national debt that is constraining our investment from the government side. But we have been debating a lot about how government should increase more R&D investments itself. Compared, see things like U.S., which has quite a huge government R&D investment programs, particularly from the Department of Defense or National Health Institute of Health or other issues, which we don't really have in Japan. So can Japan increase this investment from the government, which then sort of triggered into some of the private increase of the private sector's investment coming along? That's what I talked about, the private-public partnership in increasing the investment, and this is our investment target of the government. Just following up on that, we have half of that investment, most of the government programs on R&D investment coming up from the Ministry of Education, sort of paying the salaries of university professors, including myself. So it's not really our R&D budget coming of the government itself. It's not going directly to a kind of technological innovation programs that will benefit on the private sector, will trigger into the private sector activities. So that's one. The other, the point about the role of government or role of business sector and transforming society 5.0 into the society 5.0. Yes, absolutely. It is crucial to have private sector engaged. We have been asking, of course, the private sector not only actively invest in those key areas of technologies, but also come up with the business models that would really help the industry or business sector to be the key players and key drivers of this. And the government would then first probably help in an initial sort of high-risk investment at the initial stage of new technology, but also create an environment for business to be more actively, feel more freely to continue their new business model by introducing deregulation and creating better environment for the business to think about more longer term of their investment in. And so that's the deregulation is another side the government play with the private sector. And then the last sort of phase of it is that the government would be actively procure those business to new technologies and things in an initial stage before it goes into the market. So the role of government in procuring this, creating an initial demand for this new technology that are important for Society 5.0 is something that the government, we are now trying to put more procurement processes and other things, especially when we talk about the areas of natural disaster and other things that some of the local areas are facing, and the new technologies that are, in this particular area, the government can purchase these new technologies at the beginning before it goes into the market. So these are the kind of important role both business and the government plays, and that the interface between or partnership between government and private sector is increasingly more, becoming more important.
So this nicely bridges to the question of Margaret. So the role of the government in that context, and I think as a key demand. So that's one role that the government take over in order also to derive technological development, being clear, setting up programs which are which give a clear perspective to the individual firms, which have a long-run perspective, but not too long in a sense of for the next 50 years, but giving clear conditions and making the rules clear under which investment decisions are taken. So that's one key role that the government has to take. And in that sense, the governments have to be very careful with respect to the missions that they choose. And what we have seen in Germany, so now I think we actually got a wake-up call with respect to artificial intelligence, and right now we also defined a certain money. We have an enquete commission, people are thinking about it, but there is now a clear budget, well, compared to what is going on in the rest of the world. People might decide if it's enough or not, so the number has to be discussed, but it's clear, it's a topic which is on the agenda. There are clear strategies with respect to programs and how they are funded, so that's one important role of the government. And as already said, the firms need to be have that clarity for the investment decision. I think that's mostly important. And I think we also need the competition with respect to ideas. So the government should not be too offensive. So we still need the ideas to come up and have a decentralized evolution of ideas. With respect to the intellectual property rights, I think it's very important that we have them and that they are respected, and that they are respected at an international level. And we have to further develop these rules, but we need to further develop these rules at a global level. So intellectual property does also not stop at the national frontier, so we need the further development of that rules. And here we need international coordination. So I see this also a crucial role of the government to international coordinate. Hopefully this answers your question. And coming back to your question with respect to R&D investment and patenting activity and the role of the indicator, yes, I completely agree with you that we have a strong concentration in a sense of that a huge variety of patenting activity takes place within a small number of firms. So we have this power law distribution, and nevertheless, I think it's still a good indicator for what drives the future development. It's not perfect. It does not cover everything, and we know about this concentration of intellectual property in these few heads, and the R&D, which is usually associated with patenting activity, is an input indicator which becomes active already before. So the patents are output indicators, R&D activity is an input indicator, and it does not transform one by one into the other. And we also have other other indicators for intellectual property, like secrets of the firms, and we have all these small enterprises who do not have the money to pay for the patents, and here also we need to facilitate the processes. So I'm completely with you that it's not a perfect indicator, but it's so far I think still one of the best that we have in order to make numbers visible, and we need the numbers in order to make a good policy. So I think this evidence-based policy is really important, just not only making policy for policy, but make it based on data that is available. Okay. But we have to make the data better, and that's why we now apply also all these new methodologies in order to make things visible that we were not be able to detect before, so as the one as I have showed you. Okay. And just a very last question, very quick, with respect to the digital literacy. You might wonder about this, but what we have the discussion that it should already start at the kindergarten, that children learn to program in, well, not these super complex programs, but to get a feeling for it as you get it for language. And that should not come at the cost of running around and having, having physical exercises. So we don't want to box them. But getting a feeling about how to learn to program and learn it as a language from scratch should become mandatory.
Franz, any final few words?
Well, to the question on how to create and the role of being inclusive, it was mentioned the role of us as users, as the clients. I mean, we are, in a way, sometimes I feel trapped into the digital transformation because we are offered services for free. Well, we think it's for free. It's a lot of convenience we can gain. And at the same time, we fuel the engine by providing data that then is the basis for the business model. So I think there's a new intransparency in this whole process that we might also be a role of government, of course, data protection and so on. That's the area, but to make people more aware of what is happening. It's very easy. We love convenience, and we trade convenience for privacy in many areas. Maybe in Germany we're more conscious about that, or more worried about that. In Japan, people are more concerned about security, data security, not so much about the privacy issue. So there are also international differences, and they are. It's also an interesting field how this will translate into regulations and regulatory environments.
Okay. Yeah. Finally, I'm between the lunch and you. So I would like to simply say a few words. It's really difficult to summarize all the discussions here. But we did some homework before, especially on Society 5.0. I like the social aspect of Society 5.0. Also, they highlight the challenges in the aging society. Especially now, I'm more than 100 years old. So I really can figure out what challenge ahead for me. So I would like reminds Atsushi, if the government, Japanese government, want to invest 1% of GDP on R&D, perhaps you can refer to the idea of the public interest innovation, which will be raised up by Jason in the afternoon. But when it's come to technology, you may find that people are divided. What kinds of technology would be more appropriate for dealing with all these social challenges? These are the discussion we will take place in the afternoon, because I'm the major coordinator behind the conference, so I know all the things. So all the important notices for you, actually, when you enjoy the lunch, do come back to bear with us in the afternoon. Okay, thank you.